Welcome back to Nordic Arms and History. Today we're talking about the Norwegian model of 1867 Remington Rolling Block. This rifle was produced at the Kongsberg Våpenfabrikk between 1867 and 1883. More than 52,000 of these were produced before production ended. In the video here, we'll be going over first the details of the rifle, starting at the end, working our way to the front, and we'll also then go over to a historical section where I cover it more in detail about the development and history of the rifle itself. Let's begin. Here we are at the rear of the rifle. Starting off, you can probably notice that the stock isn't really in mint condition. That is because one of the previous owners at some point has fastened a different stock to this rifle, as the butt plate is not numbers matching, and you can see that it's not really nice. Now it looks like, from what I can see, it was originally sanded down or filed with a metal file. I can see some of the tooling here, and also it was lacquered. However, what I decided to do was sand down this lacquer and then stain the wood so it actually finally matched the front handguard again, and then I put a boiled linseed oil finish on it. It's not perfect, however I think it's at least much better than what it used to be. Also, as you can see, the butt plate is out of brass, different to the Krag-Jørgensen, which had a steel butt plate. As you can also see, it is fastened by 2 screws directly into the stock here. The way the stock is actually fastened to the rifle itself is just by a single screw, as you can see, just identical to the regular rolling blocks of the US. A single screw goes from the tang in here through the stock and then fastens and clamps down at the bottom tang here. This does open it up to the same issues that the American rolling blocks had, with cracks forming right by the screw here because of stress. Now let's take a look and see how this rifle actually works. As you can see here, this uses a rolling block action, which has 2 of these hammers that go down and actually fire the rifle. Now, for those who don't know what a rolling block system looks like, I'll show you here. You have this main firing hammer that you can fall down to a half cock, which is a safety, which the trigger won't work, and the floating gate won't work either. Then you pull it back one more, you're in a firing position. It allows you also then to open this loading gate, which you can then put in a cartridge. Now this is, of course, is a dummy round. As you can see here, we put this in like so. Then we close, and it'll close like so. Then we're ready to fire. Then we would fire the rifle. It would then hit the firing pin and then fire the round. Then to reload, we just have to again pull this all the way back like so, and then fling out the shell by doing so, like that. Take the spent cartridge, and then you're good for another round. Now let's take a look at the markings of this rifle. Now moving on to the markings on the receiver itself. As you can see here, there is again the crowned K from the Kongsberg Våpenfabrikk. You also have a year of manufacture, again, the 1876 marking here, and you have actually numbers for the screws themselves, so 1, 3, and then 2 right here. You can also see here the serial number on the rifle. And another interesting thing here is actually the way that these hammers are actually in place. These are 2 free moving bolts that are all loose that I can just push out if I wanted to. However, as you can see, this holding plate is actually what keeps them in place. So a very simple design, and all I have to do is screw this one piece out and I can basically disassemble the whole action. Here we have the markings on the top of the rifle. As you can see right here, there is the crowned K, that is for the Kongsberg Våpenfabrikk. We have the year of manufacture, this one is 1876, and then of course the serial number on the rifle itself. Also here you can see the inspector's marking, and what's really interesting about this is this one has OK, and that actually stands for Ole Herman Krag, meaning Krag himself in fact inspected this rifle, and we'll be actually talking more about the inspectors later on in the video. Now we're moving on to the rear sight. Now an interesting thing to note is when the rifle was adopted in 1876, the rear sight was actually not a part of the adoption, as they wanted to develop a proper sighting system after the fact. Now, we'll be going deeper into this a little bit later in the video, but as you can see here, this is installed with a Krag's rear sight. Now, this is actually one of Krag's designs himself, and is the same one that was used on the Krag-Jørgensen. A very simple ladder style that goes like this, and you can see it's just a very simple design that is just springed here. You can also see it's serialized. You can also see the side markings here. Now this is actually measured in Allen, not meters, is something that I found out later on. Now moving on to the first barrel band. As you can see, a very simple barrel band that is screwed here. You can also see there is space for the sling here. Now, this thing would actually not be in the stock. It would actually be in the trigger guard here, as you can see the hole right there by the trigger guard. And this is in fact identical to the next barrel band right here, as you can see. It's also then, of course, slotted in place here. There is a hole here for a cleaning rod. However, this rifle is missing one, but I will be putting one up on the screen right here. Here we can see the front of the rifle. As you can see here, there's a very simple front blade sight and also the bayonet locking lug. Now, as you can see here, I have my original bayonet. All you do is line up the lock here, and then you push in, and then you should lock it. Now, there is an issue with this one where it does not want to lock. There's, I think, a reason for that, and that is because a lot of these bayonets were actually fitted onto the rifle as they were produced. And this one, even though it is in a very close serial number range, in fact in the same 1000, it doesn't fit. Now, that can depend on a lot of things, production quality and such. However, in this case, it just does not fit, and I don't want to force it in.
In the 19th century, firearms technology underwent significant changes, revolutionizing weaponry of the time. At the start of the century, muzzle-loading flintlock rifles were the standard issue for most military forces, including the Norwegian military. By the 1840s, percussion locks came into widespread use, which significantly improved ignition reliability, though weapons were still loaded from the muzzle. During this period, many older flintlocks in Norway were converted to percussion ignition. Norway had been at the forefront of adopting breech-loading firearms with percussion ignition, such as the so-called chamber-loading rifles, or kammerladningsgeværet. Following extensive trials starting in 1837, the Norwegian infantry began to adopt these rifles in the late 1840s. Initially, the caliber was 18 lødig, or 16.8 millimeters, using round projectiles. However, during the 1850s, pointed projectiles were introduced, further enhancing the performance of these rifles. Chamber-loading rifles were advanced for their time, offering both accuracy and speed of loading compared to traditional muzzle-loading firearms. After extensive trials starting in 1856, a new chamber-loading rifle with a smaller caliber was adopted in 1860. This rifle, referred to as the firelinjer kammerladergevær, featured improved precision, was lighter, and had a slimmer design. However, by the 1860s, it had become evident that firearms technology was shifting towards the use of metallic cartridges. As a result, the once cutting-edge chamber-loading rifles began to seem outdated. By the mid-1860s, the Norwegian military recognized its need to modernize its arsenal. The chamber-loading rifles, while still serviceable, were being overtaken by the development of metallic cartridge technology. In response to this shift, a Norwegian-Swedish Rifle Commission was established by royal decree on October 5, 1866, with the following members. Their task was to evaluate new rifle designs and calibers to select the best option for a modern military rifle. On October 12, 1867, the Commission made its final recommendation. The Remington rifle should be adopted as a new infantry rifle. They also proposed several detailed specifications of the rifle, although there was some disagreement regarding the choice of sights. The decision came down to two options, the Schweitzer sight and the angle ladder sight. On November 22, 1867, King Charles approved the adoption of the Remington rifle with a saber bayonet as a model rifle for the Norwegian infantry. It was specified that the approval applied to the rifle itself and not the sights. The model rifle was equipped with an angle ladder sight, which would remain in use until a superior sight design was developed. Over time, the Remington rifle underwent several modifications. By 1870, model rifle number 22 included features such as a steel hammer and breech block, pinned rear sight, and other design changes. This model was approved by the Army Command on March 24, 1871. Further modifications followed in 1873, including rounding the edges in accordance of the Rifle Commission's earlier recommendations. The rifle, originally referred to as the four-line Remington rifle, had its designation changed to the 12mm Remington rifle on July 23, 1879, when Norway adopted the metric system. However, the current designation, the M1867 Remington rifle, was rarely used at the time. In 1868, Premier Lieutenant Krag presented two sight designs for the Remington rifle, one of which was the combination of an Enfield sight and the Schweitzer sight. This design proved to be about half of the cost to produce compared to the Enfield sight and was approved on March 12, 1868. Krag received a patent for this sight on July 30, 1869. In 1868, significant funds were allocated for the acquisition of Remington rifles, including 100,000 specie for producing 5,000 rifles at the Kongsberg Weapons Factory, and acquiring the patent rights from Remington & Sons. An additional 400,000 specie was earmarked for new machinery and equipment to mass-produce these rifles. Norway had to pay a patent fee on 8,666 specie to Remington, an equivalent cost of producing about 550 rifles with bayonets and scabbards. Initially, priority was given to converting the old 4-line chamber-loading rifles into Lund rifles. Conversion work took place at the Kongsberg Weapons Factory and the main arsenal in Kristiania, Oslo. By 1867, Kongsberg had begun forging barrels and producing other parts, but soon realized the need for more modern machinery. Over the next few years, Kongsberg Weapons Factory acquired new equipment to support stable annual production of 5,000 rifles, a major leap towards modern industrial weapon production. In 1870, Kongsberg Weapons Factory delivered 2,497 Remington rifles with saber bayonets, having previously produced only small batches. Early rifles cost 12 specie without bayonet, but by the mid-1870s, improved equipment had reduced the production costs. By 1876, 6,060 rifles were delivered at 34 crowns per rifle. By 1888, the Remington rifle production had ended as the Army had enough rifles, and the Kongsberg Weapons Factory began transitioning to the new Yarman rifle. Due to the delays transitioning Kongsberg Weapons Factory for Remington rifle production, it was decided in 1869 to purchase rifles from Sweden. In the 1870 budget, 9,800 specie was allocated for the acquisition of 3,000 Remington rifles from Husqvarna. An additional 2,000 rifles were purchased in 1872. The Swedish rifles differed from the Norwegian ones by having Krag model sights, a brass-tipped cleaning rod, and steel barrels. They also featured a different stock angle, a iron butt plate, and a simpler sling swivel attachment. Notably, Lieutenant Amel and Rustmester Lund inspected these rifles to ensure they met Norwegian standards. After arrival in Norway, test firings were conducted with both Norwegian and Swedish rifles. The tests showed that the steel-barreled Husqvarna rifles had better accuracy, though the difference wasn't significant enough to require adjustments to the sight setup. However, minor sight corrections were planned for future production. Even after the adoption of the Yarman rifle, the Remington rifles remained in high demand. By the mid-1890s, when older firearms like percussion rifles, chamber-loading rifles, and the Lund rifles were being phased out, it was decided to retain the Remington rifles for service. While the Yarman rifles equipped the most prioritized units of the Army, the Remingtons were allocated to the Landstorm and other less critical units. Many Remington rifles had also been converted to carbines, further extending their service life. By 1895, the inventory of Remington rifles remained mostly intact. Aside from those converted to carbines, however, the outdated Remington rifles began to be sold off by the main arsenal. These rifles, often accompanied by saber bayonets, were offered at affordable prices, making them accessible to civilians, particularly marksmen who could not afford the Krag-Jørgensen. While the Remington rifles were still functional, they were no match for the superior Krag rifles. Sales of the 12mm ammunition also followed suit. By 1905, the main arsenal still had about 32,000 Remington rifles in stock. Over the next few years, these numbers dwindled, with 30,200 remaining in 1906, 29,000 in 1907, By 1908, a significant portion of the remaining stock was sold off, marking the end of the Remington's service in Norway.
Alright everyone, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions regarding the rolling block rifle, consider leaving a comment down below. I'm more than happy to answer as many as I can. Also, if you feel like this video deserves it, leave it a like. Of course, that'll help the algorithm recommend it to more people, as usual with YouTube. Also, if you want to learn more about Nordic arms and history, consider subscribing. Until the next one, take care. Bye-bye.